today is our colloquium, so the third Wednesday of the month. And we try to focus this week's webinar on slightly foundational concepts, just things that we feel that, coaches should know and leaders should know. And today we have the best of both worlds because we're talking about coaching competencies and leadership and how the two are intertwined and how the two work together and all those wonderful, lovely things. Because at Coacharya, we do believe that coaching and leadership are like this. And the best kinds of leaders are leaders who coach. And a lot of coaches can expect to work with leaders. So no matter what your background is, I think in coaching or in leadership, I think today's webinar, you'll get a lot of value and practical value at that. So Cindy's going to lead. Ram will be her discussion partner. I will be in the background as usual. And when you enjoy this webinar and you want to learn more about leadership specifically, Cindy is going to have a 30-hour elective program later this year, in the summer for us in Northern Hemisphere. But I believe in late August we decided. But yeah, Cindy's going to have a 30-hour accredited course on leadership. She literally has a PhD in leadership and is a master coach. So honestly, there is no better person, I think, that you can learn from if coaching and leadership are what you want to learn than Cindy. So I highly encourage you to consider that elective. In addition to that, we have a couple additional short courses in NLP that we've added to the schedule by popular request. That's with one of our alumni. It's just an NLP primer. So you will get CCE credit for it, but it's not part of the larger training program. It's just kind of the basics on reframing with NLP. So if you're interested in that, please head over to our website, coacharya.com/events, and you will see that there. We have regular training programs, etc. So you know where to find us, coacharya.com/events. And I'm going to vanish, and then Cindy is going to take over today's topic on coaching competencies and leadership. Cindy.
Thanks, Magda. Ram and I are going to work through the coaching competencies. We're going to try to do it in a structural way, meaning one competency at a time, and draw some alignment as we talk. And we would love for you to consistently engage with us on the chat box, adding your sense to it, your experience, your wisdom, so that we can make this quite an interactive learning space. I'm going to pick up one core competency, and the first one I'm going to pick up is embodying a coaching mindset. Now, I think all of you know that competency quite well by now, but I will draw some reference to it. Before going into the competency, I'd like to raise this question around, what do you think are leadership competencies? And I know some of you already answered active listening and visioning. What else do you think are key leadership competencies? I did some background homework and I came up with a whole lot too. You can go on typing and I'll continue talking. And some of the key leadership competencies include social intelligence, conflict management, interpersonal skills, learning, agility, meaning openness to learning, decision-making. A leadership competency is also being a good coach, or having coaching skills, emotional intelligence, having industry expert, of course, curiosity, change management, sharing a compelling vision, of course, managing oneself, right? Managing self, managing others, and somebody spoke about ethics and values. Also, a sense of inclusiveness, a sense of belonging, working in a systemic way. Those are just some. That list goes on and on. I'm sure you can think of many, many more. Absolutely, being invested in the team. So coming back to the core competency, embodying a coaching mindset. Ram, I'm going to engage with you because you're too quiet. So Ram, what do you think about this topic, embodying a coaching mindset? What are we putting out from there that aligns with leadership competencies?
Yeah, first of all, for those who may feel a little confused, coaching mindset is part of the 2019 ICF's core competencies. And we have been working only with the new 2019 coaching competencies of ICF rather than the older one, because even though it has not been made into a standard assessment platform, that's where we are going. And so we will continue to do that. So I just want you all to understand. So if later we are talking about CC2s and CC3s, they are going to be referring to the new competencies and not the old. And the new competencies, as many of you know, especially if you're from Coacharya, they are 8, starting with ethics. The second one is coaching mindset. The third is agreement. The fourth is trust and safety now. The fifth is presence. The sixth is active listening. The seventh is evoking awareness. And finally, it's about learning and growth, which is the last one, 8. And this is also in line with what EMCC had for a long time, which was called understanding self. So going back into the coaching mindset, for example, I'm very curious. It's a good thing that a couple of you have pointed.
Ram, we lost your voice. You're muted.
I don't know what happened. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, totally sorry. A couple of competencies which are not necessarily pure coaching competencies. Even earlier, when Cindy asked this question, what are those competencies you think a coach would have in terms of being a leader? There were a couple that came up there, which was about something to do with the creating an environment for others to excel, for example, developing other leaders and so on. And then, of course, when you talked about the leadership competencies, many of you have talked about strategic thinking, business acumen, and so on. Now, what we would like you to do is to bring up specific cases that you are facing. Many of you probably are in the space of executive leadership. You may be in professions. Many of you may be working as coaches with executive, which is the reason we have chosen this particular subject. Typically, the coaching mindset, as today the competency is defined, it's about engaging with a larger journey of coaching, not just with one session as it used to be before. Second, bringing in stakeholders into picture. It is not just the individual whom we are coaching, but also the larger groups that they are part of as teams in work or family, etc., and also the larger environment in a systemic way. It's also about, which was not said earlier, creating awareness within oneself. And earlier it was only about creating awareness in the client. This recognizes the fact that unless we have awareness as coaches within ourselves, it's not going to be possible to create awareness in other people. So some of these things have been now pretty much put out there as what a coaching mindset should be, so that we understand ourselves better. Now, Cindy's question is, in terms of leadership, where does this apply? Now, I'm putting together some of the stuff that you talked about, some of the things that Cindy talked about. In my experience I had been a leader, corporate leader for decades. I was a CEO and group CEO and chairman and all kind of stuff, plus running companies and all that stuff for about maybe 20 plus years. I walked this space. And also today, I work with a lot of leaders, not necessarily all CEOs, because many CEOs do not want to change, they just want other people to change. But whatever it may be, if you were to look at the top 4 or 5 leadership challenges, let me put them not merely as competencies, but challenges which leaders need to face and therefore develop the competency framework to be able to work towards that. One of the highest rated leadership challenges today, and this has been borne out by many, many surveys, including those by McKinsey and various other people, is no longer about performance management. It is about people management. It's about people engagement, as it is called. And the maximum number of training dollars of billions is being spent just in this area. People like Gallup have conducted various polls. They have put down how many percentage of people are disengaged, which is almost about 30 plus, 1/3. How many people are actively engaged, which is 1/3. The remaining 1/3 are sitting on the fence. And these people who are disengaged can actually be saboteurs and they can cause damage to the company. And so how do you get them engaged? What is the process? The second one is, as someone has already pointed out, it's about leadership development. It is about succession planning. So there are a few of these which are pretty much today in leadership thinking far more critical. And these are answered by people who are CEOs, who are investors in companies, who are board members of companies. And they are more and more relating to the engagement of people, management of people as resources, but treating them like machines. And very few of them today directly talk about something like performance management or even strategic thinking, as many of you have put on there. It may be a very nice thing to say, strategic thinking. Now then you start looking at what does it mean really, strategic thinking? It's very, very difficult to answer, but we'll come to it in a minute. Why systemic work is really the correct answer to strategic thinking. But essentially it's about people engagement. And this people engagement then becomes spread out into multiple areas in terms of how do we treat one another with respect, creating a psychologically safe space by being present, by being a good listener, by asking people, not telling them. It's no longer possible to call a subordinate and say, jump, and expect that person to say, how high, sir? Today, a millennial will turn around and say, why the hell should I jump? You show me how to jump. Why are you asking me to jump? Earlier in my own days, when I was a trainee and I was a young manager, maybe I was a bit of a maverick, but most people say, how high, sir? That's no longer acceptable. So the respect for other people, the emotional intelligence, like Cindy talked about social consciousness, for example, and those are the kind of things which are today extraordinarily important at the first level. The second level, it's also about collaboration. How do we work with one another? There's a far more importance that is being paid in terms of not just one person becoming a star and expecting to be rewarded either in money or fame or status or whatever as stars. And those days are actually dwindling. We are recognizing more and more. Google has done this wonderful study called Project Aristotle and later Project Oxygen. There's a lot of work which demonstrates that teams are going to be the answer. And all these come together in what we in Coacharya call should be the coaching mindset, which is a systemic approach that is not just about you. It's about the people who you work with. It's about the larger system. In organization, development is typically referred to as self, as an individual, the stakeholders, the people around them, the team members, and then the larger system, which could be the organization, which could be a larger organization. So, Cindy, to answer your question in a rather broad way, this is how I'm putting together what the coaching mind should be. And I see companies actually moving in this direction more and more. 3 years ago, when I used to tell them, hey, let's look at it systemically, the answer was, duh, what are you talking about? We don't know. But more and more people are willing to listen. Thanks.
Absolutely, Ram. You picked on a lot of valuable points that we would expand as we go along, like on the trust and the safety. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. So, Ram, from what you're saying, from what our participants on the call said, it seems like leaders and coaches both adopt a particular mindset or the competencies of a mindset. And some of the competencies that show up, which give them this particular mindset, is exactly what you were saying, the emotional intelligence and the ongoing learning. Both leaders and coaches are quite, you ask any coach about learning and they call themselves lifelong learners. They're very quick to point that, I love learning, I'm a lifelong learner. Leaders have that particular mindset to develop themselves, to do ongoing learning and development. And they like to track the progress, manage the progress, and they like continued improvement in themselves, like coaches. So we can call that a particular mindset that both leaders and coaches have. There's also, some things, as you mentioned, around both leaders and coaches have the ability to, maintain emotional stability, to maintain the emotions or contain the emotions. We know that some are quite reactive, but a good competency there would be to be emotionally intelligent, so maintain emotionally regulate yourself. That's a good word. Also included in this competency of a mindset, a leader and a coach, is the ability to use resources, as one of our participants have said, to draw on from resources and support when necessary. I think I picked up all that. And if there's anything else that's showing up, both coaches and leaders have responsibility for choices they make. They feel a sense of responsibility and accountability. And in embodying a coaching mindset, I think that's one of the first bullet points we talk about in that competency. Let's pick up on the next core competency, which is a big alignment or similarity with the coaching and leadership competency. That's around establishing and maintaining agreements. Now, under the framework of leadership, we may not call it that. We may make reference to it as visionary and strategic thinking and planning. And I'm going to hand over to Ram because he's quite the expert on the topic, meaning he's got lots of experience with leadership, strategizing, how to draw agreements, objectives. And that's exactly what we're doing in slightly different ways in a coaching agreement. Whether the agreement is for 10 sessions, for 2 years, for 1 session. Together, we partner with people that we're involved with, in our case, client or clients, to draw an agreement or to agree on what we are going to talk about in this session, what are our measures of success. Leaders are very interested in targets and success measures. So I'm going to hand over to Ram to expand on leadership qualities around visioning, planning, and strategizing. Ram.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Let me start with this. In coaching terms, the way that I would like to interpret agreement is not like a legal contract or whatever, but it's merely one of being absolutely aware of what each other's expectations are and how they are going to be met. And that's a pathway that we are trying to take. Now, my own experience in coaching senior leaders, there are many of them, they would first start telling me that, this particular team, and I saw that with a few people, mostly Indians, who had moved back from the United States to India. And the grouse was that, out there, everybody knew what they had to do, and they did it. Here, I'm finding it extremely difficult. and people are not performing as well as they experienced in the US or wherever else it was, and so on and so forth. So after a while, I would start asking them, okay, when you say that they're not performing well, against what are they not performing well? What do you mean? You should know as a leader that performance is important. I said, yeah, fine. But is there a set of expectations that you have in mind that they are supposed to fulfill? No, that's not necessary. So I said, how would they know what they are being measured against? Believe you me, it sounds like a comic tragedy, but this is happening in pretty much every organization at the senior levels that I see. The boss man expects the subordinate to be a mind reader, what they want the performance to be. And that mind keeps changing, and therefore there is no fixed goal. It's a constantly moving target. The first step in any leadership competence ought to be, it should be written down in letters of gold somewhere and imprinted in the memory of every single person out there who needs to supervise some people or work with someone else in order to extract work out of them, that have you clearly defined what is it that you expect from the people who work with you, and have you discussed it with them so that there's a mutual agreement? These two factors are totally inseparable and are critical in today's management. It's no longer hierarchical, autocratic, dictatorial kind of bullying kind of hierarchy where you just say, hey, if you don't do it, I'm going to throw you out. People don't care. You'll find today that I'm sure you read the same newspapers that I do and watch the same TV that I do, that people are saying, I don't want to go back to work, to hell with you. I want to stay at home. I want to have the freedom. If you want me, okay, oblige me. And that's what it is going to be in future. So if any of you is a leader out there or coaching leaders, first make sure that the leader has the good sense to be able to sit down with his subordinate, to be able to discuss what is it that they both agree upon in terms of one another's expectation. Not that the boss's expectation of the subordinate, but also the subordinate's expectation of the boss in terms of the work support that he or she requires from them. And this then becomes a basis for a performance review and a feedback. This is the cornerstone of any leadership competence in corporations today, which I find sadly lacking. 70% of the time, I find this is totally lacking. I don't know how many of your companies that you work with have a proper expectation setting, contract setting session with a subordinate. And there's a review, which is people engaged, which is not done once a year on a piece of paper. The person doesn't even know what he is being judged against or what he is being scored. It's like what happens in the bureaucracy in the government today. It's all confidential. Your performance review is confidential. It's absolute BS. Such organizations do not deserve to exist. The feedback, I would say very quickly covering something that we may come to later, is at 5 levels. The first level is a feedback where the boss says, you are no good. That could be okay in the olden days when people were slaves to you. Today, a subordinate will walk out if you tell that person, or they would take you to court. In the US, this is not even allowed. In most companies in India, this is zero tolerance. I know companies like Levers where just not accepted. It's a zero tolerance policy against such things. The second to say, oh, your work is no good. That is no good either. You are no good a boss if you were to say those two things. At the very first level, there has to be a justification. But even that is not good enough today. The first level, which is a 4th level, is about going back to the common agreement that you and the subordinate have had. And on the basis of that, being able to tell that, hey, this is where I think perhaps you always start with the good things. That's human psychology, that you've done well, but there are certain areas which you need to develop, etc. And that is the 4th level, which is probably the base level of feedback today that is expected of you as a leader. And the 5th level, which is what really most companies should practice, and some excellent companies do, The boss doesn't start. The boss just asks the subordinate, can you please tell me, against the expectation that we both set up for each other, how are we doing? What's happening to you? Where have you done well? Where you think you need to improve? And point out only if there are any differences. And invariably, my own experience with literally thousands of people who have worked for me over the years, that a good subordinate, a good manager, always puts himself down in terms of scoring than I would have ever done. The moment I see that someone is rating himself higher or herself higher than what I would have rated, my antennae go up, because that person is not worthwhile, honestly. And over and above that, today you have something like Gallup's 12, Q12 and those kind of systems where on a very regular basis, pretty much every month, can you meet with each of your subordinates and ask them, hey, how are you doing? How is it going with your family? What is it that I can do to help you? People engagement questions, so that you build that engagement policy. And I don't know if you people are aware of this adage, absolutely true. People do not leave a company because they don't like the company. They leave a company because they don't like the boss. That's the absolute honest truth. So unless the leader changes his spots and behaves in a manner that is respectful, unconditional positive regard, he treats a subordinate as his client as well, empathy, generativity, the leader doesn't deserve to exist. I'll stop there.
So that's a lovely way to lead to the next bit of core competencies, coaching competencies, around trust and safety. Let's combine trust and safety and maintaining presence. Because that's exactly what you're speaking about, why do people leave? It's because of more often because of the boss than the organization. So I have a question for everybody. They're too quiet. You're too quiet. This topic of trustworthy, and we know coaching is a trustful process. There's lots of confidentiality, and you build trust, or you maintain trust with your client within the coaching process, or cultivate some trust. In your experience, in the organizations you work for, or people that you know in the organizational space, how trustworthy are the leaders around you? And please go on, don't answer in a yes or no. Go on to expand your answers. What's your experience of trustworthy with leaders around you? Yeah. Trustworthy is there. Yeah. I'll expand the question. How do you feel when working with leaders around you that are trustworthy? How do you show up in a space where leaders around you are trustworthy? Yeah, I like that. Mirror trust. Absolutely. You're more present. Definitely, you're more engaged, you're more invested, interested, right? And you want to give off your best because the environment there creates a space for you to give off your best. So there's something there about trust that works together with safety. The coaching competency talks about cultivates trust and safety as coach partners with the client to create a safe, supportive environment that allows the client to share freely. May not always be the case in in working with leaders within organizations. You may not always have the space to work or to share freely, but there are sometimes that is possible, right? Or share your opinion around that. And of course, the definition of trust and safety goes on to talk about the coach maintains a relationship of mutual respect and trust. And I would expand it, that mutual respect, goes on in the workplace to include, same as with coaching, culture, context, diversity, inclusion, a sense of belonging. So my question, are you experiencing this in a leadership space with the leaders around you, especially within organizations? Do you get a sense of trust, inclusion, respect, a sense of belonging? Like the point Ram made earlier on, that workplace environments are changing, and people that are now working from home have formed a set of values and way of working in working from home. And going back to work now poses different challenges. Ram, you want to expand the topic?
Yeah, sure. A couple of things. Let me start this way. And Cindy, with your permission, let me try and integrate trust and presence. Both of them are about building relationships. So even though the competency description may be slightly different, trust is about the space that we create, and presence is more about the way that we relate to the individuals. You know, there was a time, and I was brought up in those times, where the only way to get performance out of people was to put the fear of God in them. So everything was done about how can you control and how can you make them afraid, just the same way religions do. And that is totally not acceptable anymore. And that is why we had all the problems in terms of class struggles and so on and so forth. And today, you will find that the knowledge industry and beyond the knowledge industry is far greater than the hierarchical manufacturing and mining industries. And therefore, people who join you at that younger levels, at 20s and so on, are far more qualified than many of the people who are in their 40s and 50s. So you cannot rule them saying that I know better than you. They can turn around and tell you, you know nothing. And that's the truth. Because I do many, many companies where people above 40 are going through serious turmoil and stress because, especially in the software technology and these kind of spaces, you're no longer relevant if around that stage you do not renew yourself and you do not shift yourself anymore. So fear is no way that you can use to drive people. And therefore, you need to come to the space where you're creating the psychological safety, the trust. And that is the first step. Gallup, when they did the study about 10, 15 years ago, they found that is where they found the disengagement. Fully 1/3 of the people in a company were completely in a space of disengagement because of fear and lack of trust and so on. And they were saboteurs. Less than 1/3 were really people who felt that we could trust them because of probably a few bosses, managers who were good. Now, those of you who really would like to, there are some beautiful articles, and there's a famous article on psychological safety. I don't remember the name of the professor from Harvard. There's a TED Talk, and Google had done this phenomenal study called Aristotle, which talks about psychological safety as the first most important criterion, and then interdependability in how teams should function. So the entire purpose of an organization in most cases today, and the job of coaches who are engaged, like we are, is to try and create that bonding, to create that trust. In some companies, the culture is so beautiful that it happens very naturally. I mean, I worked fortunately, very, very fortunately, for one such company. And across the world, it's like that. Unilever, in India, it is Hindustan Lever. I'm not trying to promote this. I don't own shares in the company. I just happen to work there for 20 years, and I still it is family. And another company where I see this happening today is Tata's, where people do not want to leave. It's like addictive. People are treated with reasonable, there may be exceptions, but by and large with so much of respect that even if they are offered twice the salaries, they do not want to go. As against this, there are many companies where the trust is damaged because of manipulation. They are constantly watching you. Are you trying to leave this company, going somewhere else, and writing to those people, oh, this person is trying that, he will do the same thing with you, or refuse to give you a proper recommendation letter, and so on and so forth. These are manipulative tactics which destroy people's trust. And once it happens, that's it. It's very, very difficult to regain. And things like harassment. And today, more and more, it's about sexual harassment. Your sensitivity to the other gender, your sensitivity to the race. These are extremely important criteria. Also to age. More and more, that's an important factor. I have seen in this forum, there are a few people who have said, oh, you know, these young people, they don't know anything. How do you think you know any better? I would like to really engage in conversation with such people who have those kind of views. You are sadly out of date, my friends. Today, you need to respect everybody, irrespective of their status, their age, their gender, their color, their race, their faith, whatever it is. We each have to have faith in one another. And that leads to the second part of the competency model, which is about the presence. And everybody thinks something like executive presence about the charisma, or you dress well and you look good, or whatever it is. Absolute BS. That's not true. The presence comes from that unconditional positive regard, that respect that you exude as a leader, the care, the nurturing, the empathy that you exude as a leader, which make people want to be with you. People want to like you. And that is about partnering, that I think the other person is my equal. And I am vulnerable along with you. Multiple other factors, which may be defined as in the case of the IC of competencies. And this becomes far more important when you are dealing with people in groups and teams. Extremely important. Very simply put, many people don't even understand the difference between a group and a team. A group, you can have multiple different people who are working with different objectives. It doesn't matter if they don't really all come together very powerfully. But if you're working as a team with a common objective to achieve a particular requirement in the case of a product or a service or something else that needs to be done, they need to be emotionally bonded. They need to know each other. They need to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. They need to be vulnerable with one another. And that's a first step in systemic work. How do you create a team out of a group? And then co-create goals and then move towards action. So these are extremely powerful steps we need to understand and move towards. And every one of them is really based on coaching competencies. And that is where the collaborative effort, somebody talked about breaking silos. You cannot break silos if you have distrust, if you have fear. The reason why silos come up is because you are insecure. That insecurity has to be removed. And someone asked a question about, is it any different in remote work? I don't really think so. But some people have an inherent fear about working remotely for whatever reason, or they have a lot of stress at home, working only from home. So we need to take care of those. So it's about the empathy that you bring about along with your trust and presence, about your ability to observe and see what's going on and to be able to respond to that. I'll stop here.
Absolutely. And somebody on the chat, sorry that I didn't get your name, spoke about respect for all. Now, I don't know when that day is going to come, but I sure do hope the day arrives soon where there is respect for all, especially in the workplace. And I think it's a collective effort. It's a conscious, collective effort on all our part to raise the bar. Right now, the bar is still a bit too low, but we got to raise the bar on respect for all. And that would mean, unique talents, abilities, working style, perceptions, insights, the way people work, identity. That would include culture, of course, respect for all those factors that I just raised. Coaching presence, as Ram just spoke about now, also includes empathy and concern for others. And coronavirus, this pandemic for the last 1.5 years, has raised our own awareness. I'm sure you would all feel the same way, on looking at different leaders around the world, noticing what attracts us to them, and also what annoys us about, what's annoying about them. So I think it, broadens our point of view around, or expands it, and we begin to pay more attention, reflect on or introspect on this whole topic of leadership competencies that it attracts and engages versus those that have a command and control style. Let's pick up another core competency, a coaching core competency that was, or is still, I think, in many cases, the number one leadership skill or competency in many research papers. That is on listening, or the coaching competency calls it listening actively. Now, there are many things around listening, or many points around listening actively. And I think you can get a good sense how Ram and I are flowing. I'll talk a bit about the coaching competency, and Ram is going to expand it into the leadership competencies. Listens actively talks about, or makes reference to, the client focuses on the client, what the client is not saying, to fully understand what is being communicated in the context of the client's systems, and to support the client's self-expression. Now, there's a lot of things there that I'm sure you're probably thinking about or reflecting on that flows into the leadership space, especially around systems and stakeholders. Ram, you want to talk about that? Active listening, systems and stakeholders.
Sure. Okay, first let me say this. In the new competencies, active listening is, I think, CC6, and it's followed by evoking awareness, which is CC7. To be honest, if you really go through the CC7, it's pretty much about what used to be earlier, exploration, questioning, powerful questioning, and direct communication. So let me try and put these two together. And actually, in the today's ICF's competency, evoking awareness is part of the last competency, 8. The first 4 or 5 markers are about the awareness competency. Anyway, without going into those kind of nitty-gritties, listening and exploration, it's not merely a coaching or a leadership competency. I think it's a basic human competency. That's the only way for us to be human. And that is where we will display our maximum potential. And somewhere someone said in our tagline, which Magda created, for us to become better self of ourselves, the only way is really to focus on our listening instead of just telling people. When we tell people, that telling comes out of our judgment, our ego, what we think we know, half the time we don't know a damn about. The listening is what Edgar Schein so beautifully says in Humble Inquiry, is that vulnerability, humility, that which you go and seek to understand something about something, the curiosity, the learning, which then becomes a cornerstone of the book that his mentee wrote, Peter Senge, about the learning organization, which is about a total systemic view. In addition to what Cindy said, empathetic, curious listening, what Otto Scharmer calls beautifully the generative listening, looking at the other person the way that the other person wishes to be. I would like to emphasize one more thing. It's not about the words the person uses. You need to be very, very conscious about the nonverbal cues, the body expressions, the voice tones, the facial expressions, to be able to understand what the client is not saying, what the other person is not saying, where there's probably a dissonance in terms of what the words that the person uses, and actually the facial or the body expressions. And they can tell you a lot more than what they are saying. asking about the body sensations. So many of you who are working with Coacharya, you would have probably understood this, and we talk about it in other programs also. We call it an LASI approach: listening and observing, acknowledging and appreciating, sensing and sharing, inquiring and exploring. And the inquiring and exploring is based on working with sensations, emotions, and thoughts. LASI and ACT, try and remember these words. And these are available in our blogs. We have written about them. And this can be the process which not only helps you in a coaching space, in terms of leadership space, in terms of coaching, but in your behavior with another person. Don't jump to telling people what to do. First, understand what they want. Ask them, what's your situational reality is? What's happening to you that is not empowering you now? That's a starting point of a coach. And then try and understand from them with the expressions, the words that they use, where they are, and explore. Cindy always says, even people who are working with us in mastery level, the biggest problem that we see, they just inquire, they don't explore. Just a mere inquiry and listening is like, I'm just eating the cherry lying on top of an ice cream. I'm not digging into the ice cream. You need to go deeper if you really want to understand. So what happens if you inquire, hey, what's going on in your mind? Because they want to mark a marker which says their emotions. What are you feeling now? If you ask that question, the assessor will mark some emotions or whatever it is. That doesn't work. The client talks about many other things, and then you go to the next one. What else? Or something of that sort. You need to observe what the client is saying. Is there a resonance in the continuity of what the person is saying? Is there a dissonance, or is there a tangential relationship? And you need to go back to what you started asking in terms of noticing something. The client always repeats something when it's important for them. Unconsciously, they will repeat. I'm frustrated, I'm challenged, I'm having a hard time. You need to explore that. You need to find out where that is coming from. Be it a client, be it a subordinate, be it a family member. And that's what listening is about. Listening is active, it's not passive. There's a difference between sympathy, which you just offer because you want to, okay, I've done my bit, it's a ritual. I'm so sorry because you lost somebody. Forget it. Your words are going to make no difference to someone who has lost something. You need to really put yourself in their shoes and remain silent and listen to what they have to say. So then based on that, you need to explore to create awareness of what's really happening within themselves, in their body, in their mind, in their thoughts, in the situation, what can they do differently? So that's the only way that you would go deeper into the listening space. Thank you.
Absolutely. The importance of exploring in coaching. It's not, if you notice the client has suddenly gone quiet and reflective, and that is a marker under CC5, maintaining presence, pause, reflections, pauses, and silence. So if you suddenly notice the client has gone quiet, it's not for you to say, I appreciate that you've gone quiet and continue coaching. It's for you to also explore. It's great that you're appreciating something, but it's for you to also, as a coach, explore. What are you reflecting on, or what's going on right now that you've become quieter? Explore it so more or potential or the unknown part can show up, and the client would get more awareness on that. But offer that invite to the client, to explore. Offer that kind of invite versus touching the surface, as Ram said, just being too surface. Pulling into the last bit of the coaching competencies and reframing or aligning to leadership competencies. I was reading an article and from the Harvard Business Review, and according to that article, it said, according to some research done, inclusive leaders have 6 particular skills that show up. You can call it skills or talents or capabilities. And I'm just going to say this 6 quite quickly because we don't have much time. One of it, first one, a visible commitment. They have a visible commitment to diversity, challenging status quo, holding others accountable, and making diversity and inclusion a personal kind of priority. The second point, they have humility. Inclusive leaders have humility. They are modest about capabilities, admit they made mistakes. They create a space for others to contribute. Very similar to coaching. We create a space for all the clients, if it's groups and teams, to contribute. Third point, the awareness of bias. They show up with the awareness of personal blind spots. They are aware of their blind spots, flaws in systems, and they work hard to address it or to resolve. Fourth, curious about others. We all know this word curiosity. It's a coaching competency, or it shows up a lot in coaching, and there are many of our core competencies in different forms, but curiosity is there. Fifth one, cultural intelligence, and attentiveness to others' culture and adaptation. And the sixth is effective collaborations. They empower others, pay attention to diversity of thinking and psychological safety, and focus on team cohesion. In a nutshell, these are 6 points that showed up in this in the Harvard Business Review on some priorities or capabilities of inclusive leaders. Now, drawing from that last core competency on results, what's it called? Facilitates clients' growth. Competency A talks about facilitating clients' growth, and how does coach partners with the client to transform learning and insights into actions, and our progress in the coaching process. And from what I've said, pulling into this core competency and into a leadership space, we know that many of these core competencies talk about, or leadership qualities talk about, accountability, responsibility, progress into success measures or targets or objectives that leaders work on or set for their teams. I'm going to stop here, bearing in mind that we have a few minutes to go, and hand over to Ram. And while Ram concludes or brings this session to a close, I'd love to hear from you. What are you walking away with from today's webinar? Or what insights, awareness is showing up for you? Even if it's something you want to walk away and think more about, or explore and expand more for yourself, what are you taking away? Ram, over to you.
Thanks, Cindy. I'll just hand over to Magda in a minute or so. Nothing exemplifies to me the last competency, learning and growth, better than Otto Scharmer's theory U. The movement from what he calls the absencing, which is about people's closed minds, where they do not even listen to what people are going through, understand what they are going through. They are blind, their senses are shut, what he calls the closed mind. The closed heart, they don't have any empathy. They say, okay, they suffer, so what? It's got nothing to do with me. And closed will, what can I do? To move into a space of what he calls the presencing, which is about the open mind, which is curious, trying to understand how people are suffering. Open heart, where they, with empathy, understand what people are doing and what can be done, and open will, finally, to be able to garner the courage to be able to do this, overcoming what he calls the fears of judgment, cynicism, and fear. If you understand this fully, and please go to Otto Scharmer's site, Presencing. He's a professor at MIT, and also the Theory U labs, it's probably the perfect, absolutely perfect example of systemic work that is being attempted today in a larger scale, especially in the space of creating awareness. I couldn't emphasize on this more. I will close with this and pass on to Magda because she wants to say a few words. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks you to both of you, Cindy and Ram. Everyone. So Cindy asked you to share what you've learned. And for those of you who claim your CCE certificates later, which you'll get emailed tomorrow, we also ask you what you've learned. So there's a lot of times where we've asked you what you've learned. I am wondering if you want to talk to each other about what you've learned. So every single week, hundreds even of you come to Coacharya's webinars and we all learn something. And we usually, I get so many emails after webinars. It's wonderful. And I pass them on to the speakers. But, you know, in one ear, out the other sometimes. And I would love for you to be able to share more of this stuff with each other. So look, at the very least, if you ever want to blog about anything, email me, magda@coacharya.com. But I'm wondering if anybody would be interested in sticking around after webinars, let's say for 20 minutes or for half an hour. Not in the webinar format. We would set up a different Zoom link and you can network. Coacharya would be happy to facilitate that. And the way that I'm thinking it could work is anybody who wants to join, joins, then myself or whoever is hosting can click the nice little button that says assign people into rooms randomly, let's say in groups of 3 or 5 or whatever we decide together. And you can discuss the content from that day's webinar. And I believe that is, you know, one of the best practices for anchoring the things that you've learned, but also to share your opinions, because we have so many people who attend that it's impossible for everyone to participate. Even if you write the comment, you know, the chat goes really quickly, so not everyone sees it. So that is my big question. And I see that there's a few people who are already saying yes, 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 which is awesome. So I think maybe today may be too early to start. I'm guessing, yeah. Let's not just jump into it, but perhaps for next time, and I don't just mean next time for the colloquium as in the 3rd Wednesday, but the next webinar and every webinar thereafter until you tell us to stop, we're gonna try this. So please be prepared. If you have done something similar elsewhere, please email me with your suggestions, because we have not done this. We talked about doing it, but we need to do it. So send me an email, let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, we will include an invitation to breakout rooms after each webinar from now on, and you can discuss as you please. That's what I had to say.
So thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Magda. Good night to all of you, wherever you are, at least from India. It's good night. Bye. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Night,
Thanks so much for
everyone.
being here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.